about you, but this last little segment of year has felt so intense. It's fair to assume that a lot of you are feeling that way. This episode has come a little bit later than usual for a few different reasons. One of them being I was traveling and then I was sick. Sag season is basically apparently when all of my friends and family decided to come onto this planet. So it's been back to back to back to back since Thanksgiving. In the past, I've taken the month of December off completely and not put out a newsletter on my Substack, not done loose leaf tea, but I felt like this year it really felt important to have a moment of integration before moving forward. A lot of what's been coming up for me over the past month as I've been reflecting has been this deep, deep, deep need for release. As it may be fairly obvious, I'm someone who works in media, and so I've been archiving for a long time. I've been taking photos, I've been journaling, I've been blogging since I was a teenager, and even before then. And this year was the first year, especially towards the end of the year, where I really felt like the weight of all that I've been accumulating. All of a sudden it felt like, why am I trying so hard to hold on to everything? It started to feel debilitating. I'm smiling because there's a hummingbird out the window. There was a period of time when I felt super, super stuck, and all of a sudden I started having these weird experiences with hummingbirds, one of which was a hummingbird getting stuck in a house that I was house sitting. I was house sitting for my brother, and a hummingbird ended up getting caught in the house, and I was like fully panicking because it was a moment in my life where I felt trapped, and all of a sudden this metaphor unfolded. As far as birds go, if a hummingbird gets stuck in your house, it's particularly difficult to get them out. One, because their primal instinct is to fly high in order to avoid predators. And so because of the way that homes are built, with that kind of gap between the ceiling and the door, they end up flying the same path back and forth again and again and again based on those survival instincts, but ultimately trapping themselves because they actually need to be able to go down in order to get out through a window or through a door. And so when that happened, it felt like this huge metaphor of how can we expect to experience something new if we're flying those same flight paths, if we're just doing the same thing back and forth again and again and again and again. There's always a lesson in that for me, especially when it comes to the end of the year. You know, I know that for many people and for many cultures, this isn't the end of the year really. But whatever cycles we're orienting ourselves around, what I appreciate is the opportunity to reflect on patterns and to release some of that baggage before moving forward, and to take a pause to consider, what have I been doing that maybe hasn't been working? What have I been doing that I want to amplify? What new flight paths can I take? Etc., 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 etc. One thing that I really learned, a major lesson for me this year, as corny as it might sound, was surrender. Historically speaking, I am a serious planner. I will typically take the end of the year into the new year to meticulously vision and outline everything that I want to manifest in the coming year. This year was a year where nothing went according to plan. The things that I worked hardest on were the things that fell through. And ironically enough, the things that I didn't anticipate, that I didn't work for at all, were the things that came together. And reflecting back on it now, I think it was a lesson in learning how to really collaborate with spirit versus thinking that I can individually control everything. We have all these plans and ideas for our lives, and these things, like an idea of how we think things should go. And then things like Saturn return come around and they just start to rock your foundation in a way that can be deeply humbling. And honestly, I felt super humbled by this year, not only because of the hard things and because I had to learn to find kind of that inner strength to hold myself and continue to feel worthy and powerful even when things weren't going how I wanted them to. But also to learn that, like, I don't have to always effort so much to get things to, quote, go the way that I want them to. If anything, when I say collaborating with the universe, what I mean is learning how to listen more deeply, which is an ongoing practice, in order to know when things are, when it's the right timing for things or not. And I think when we're operating from a place of comparison to other people's lives, it can be so easy to think, well, they're doing this and I'm not doing that, so what's wrong with me? But as someone shared to me recently, it can just be a reminder that it's not the time. And then on the flip side, some other things may fall into place that it is time for. Returning to that hummingbird story, at a certain point, the hummingbird got so exhausted from flying back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, that it had no choice but to land on the ground and completely surrender, which is a very vulnerable act, right? If you're operating from a place of fear that predators lie below, for you to be so exhausted that you need to just sit on the ground and fully surrender, knowing that you need to rest, that's terrifying. I remember waking up in the middle of the night, kind of hearing these little chirps. And in my own anxiety and fear, I was like, I looked over and saw the bird on the ground, and I was like, fuck, it died. And as I mentioned before, this was probably 2020. I was so vulnerable and sensitive at that time that the thought of a hummingbird dying in my home, in my care, felt tragic. And so I panicked and I went to the bird, and sure enough, it hadn't died. But it had just exhausted itself, and it had no choice but to just sit and surrender. And that was actually the opportunity that allowed me to pick it up and put it outside by a bowl of sugar water, where once it recuperated, it could drink the water, get its energy back, and fly away. It needed that support in that moment. And the thing is, for some birds, you can kind of catch them. Hummingbirds are incredibly delicate. You can't catch them. Also, don't give them honey water. I learned this. It's too dense and it will kill them. Thinking about the metaphor of the hummingbird and just, how I've been feeling, how I imagine many folks are feeling, how do we regain the energy when it's been so difficult? But I think that there is something to be learned from surrender. When we're in these moments where horrific things are happening, or when things don't go our way, or when there's massive delays, or there's something to be said for just laying it all down and letting spirit show you the way forward. But it's really important to honor your rest. I want to emphasize that it's so important to have rituals and practices for yourself to make sure that you're processing and releasing, and that you're letting things move through you and not holding on to them. In doing my preparation for this episode, because there's so much that I could talk about and my energy levels have felt so low, I decided to pull tarot beforehand instead of at the end. And what came up was a few things, but one, leaning into the expression of gratitude. And gratitude from a deep place of love, not just gratitude as like a blanket practice, but gratitude sourced from the deepest parts of us, the deepest, most loving parts of us. Then there's this idea of like sitting with the sparks and planning them before moving forward. So giving yourself pause to look out at your landscape and understand what are all of the things that I've experienced this year, and what wisdom and information can I use moving forward without feeling like I have to immediately act. Sometimes we have to just pause and go through the archives, see what needs to be cleared out, offering gratitude to it in the process. Very kind of Marie Kondo vibes of like, thank you for all that you've given to me, and I now give you back to source to be renewed into something else. And from that, there may be unexpected opportunities, new beginnings, abundance that comes, because at that point, we are finally operating in accordance to Earth's natural cycles, which is something that I know we're always fighting to do because it's just so counterintuitive in the within the social structures that we're raised in. I feel that it takes a lot of courage to choose gratitude and love, even when we are facing the scariest shit. But I think when it comes down to it, it's like, what are our lives in allegiance to? Are we so in allegiance to capitalism or the status quo that we can't find gratitude in something? As I'm sitting here, I'm looking out the window into the garden, and the sun is shining through the trees, and there's a very gentle breeze, and it's just peaceful and it's present. It's so simple. And I feel deeply called to continue the ongoing work of recentering that type of presence and love and gratitude as the source foundation energy to do any of the work that is bigger and feels more taxing. This word surrender is so funny in many ways, because it's like, even just this week I was speaking to a client of mine about when you're in those in-between spaces between the past work and the future work, and there can be often this desire to curate and like perfect and overly plan every single detail, so that, because that is kind of what we were taught to believe is what creates progress and change. And what I was telling him is like, don't undervalue the feminine version of that, and learning how to create and be devotional and be disciplined in ways that are gentle on the nervous system, and knowing when to be in receptivity, knowing when to rest, knowing when to just fully release, let shit go, let shit die, let things turn into nourishment for the soil for new life. Broken record, I love talking about it, but it's because it's true. It's the most, here we are always in these cycles. We're always in these cycles. And I think the more we can learn to be attuned with where in the cycle we're at, the less likely we are to experience panic when we're not, moving along with capitalism's unrealistic expectations. It's impossible to be in constant ongoing growth. It's unnatural. So my invitation for myself and for all of you is to use the remainder of this year into the coming year to really honor your moments of reflection and know that they're in service of something important and good. For you to take your privacy, for you to go offline, for you to nurture your relationships, for you to find your gratitude and your love and your hope. All of that is essential to the bigger picture of these things that we are committed to seeing through in our lives and in our communities and in the world. I've started ruminating on this idea of gratitude just before Thanksgiving. I've been reading Braiding Sweetgrass, which y'all know. But I came across this chapter, which is called Allegiance to Gratitude. It just was so spot on between like Thanksgiving, the holiday, and then the elections, and thinking about like politics and what we're pledging our allegiance to. And then I read this chapter called Allegiance to Gratitude. And in this chapter, Robin Wall Kimmerer, the author, is talking about when her daughter basically takes a stand to not stand up in class and speak the Pledge of Allegiance. And then she goes on to reflect on the Onondaga Nation Thanksgiving address, which she describes as being used at the beginning of the school week. She writes, "Here the school week begins and ends not with the Pledge of Allegiance, but with the Thanksgiving address, a river of words as old as the people themselves, known more accurately in the Onondaga language as the words that come before all else. This ancient order of protocol sets gratitude as the highest priority." In each section, there's an offering of gratitude to some element, some being, some entity, and finishing with the phrase, "Now our minds are one." And it's this idea that all of our gifts and talents are weaving together to create this almost like magnificent God consciousness. And that if we're only aware of it, and if we're only aware of all of that beauty that is always available to us, we stand the chance of actually seeing each other and understanding one another, which has been the central question of my whole year, right? Is like, what do we need to do to see each other more clearly? She writes, "You can't listen to the Thanksgiving address without feeling wealthy. And while expressing gratitude seems innocent enough, it is a revolutionary idea. In a consumer society, contentment is a radical proposition. Recognizing abundance rather than scarcity undermines an economy that thrives by creating unmet desires. Gratitude cultivates an ethic of fullness, but the economy needs emptiness. The Thanksgiving address reminds you that you already have everything you need." And so, just bringing that full circle to this feeling that I've had in my body at the end of the year of wanting to just take stock of things. It's like, how can I just use this as an opportunity to take note of all the enoughness and abundance in my life, and to really see that as a radical act. It was really interesting to be reading this around just before or just after the election, because I'm like very anti-nationalist, and I'm much more interested in, these ideas of interconnectedness, and I really resent the fact that nationalism pits us in this ongoing project of like fighting and battling against one another for total domination. I just think it's so silly. And one of the things she says is, "What would it be like to be raised on gratitude, to speak to the natural world as a member of the democracy of species, to raise a pledge of interdependence? No declarations of political loyalty are required, just a response to a repeated question. Can we agree to be grateful for all that is given?" In the Thanksgiving address, I hear respect towards all our non-human relatives, not one political entity, but to all of life. What happens to nationalism, to political boundaries, when allegiance lies with winds and waters that know no boundaries, that cannot be bought or sold? And this is a segment from the address itself. Now we turn to the west, where our grandfathers, the thunder beings, live. With lightning and thundering voices, they bring with them the water that renews life. We bring our minds together as one to send greetings and thanks to our grandfathers, the thunderers. We now send greetings and thanks to our eldest brother, the sun. Each day without fail, he travels the sky from east to west, bringing the light of a new day. He is the source of all the fires of life. With one mind, we send greetings and thanks to our brother, the sun. Now our minds are one. I hope that you will read this book. I hope that you will read this chapter, because there's just so many gems, and it's a meditation practice to sit with it and to give yourself the time to take note of all of the things that are blessing your life, all of the materials, all of the beings, all of the particular details that are so quick to gloss over when we're in the hustle and bustle of day-to-day modern life. She writes, cultures of gratitude must also be cultures of reciprocity. Each person, human or no, is bound to every other in a reciprocal relationship. Just as all beings have a duty to me, I have a duty to them. If an animal gives its life to feed me, I am in turn bound to support its life. If I receive a stream's gift of pure water, then I am responsible for returning a gift in its kind. An integral part of a human's education is to know those duties and how to perform them. The Thanksgiving address reminds us that duties and gifts are two sides of the same coin. Eagles were given the gift of far sight, so it's their duty to watch over us. Rain fulfills its duty as it falls, because it was given the gift of sustaining life. What is the duty of humans? If gifts and responsibilities are one, then asking, what is our responsibility, is the same as asking, what is our gift? It is said that only humans have the capacity for gratitude. This is among our gifts. Ugh, I love that. I love that so much. And I think as a beautiful, ending reflection prompt for moving into the new year, which maybe in the next episode I'll go deeper into this because I feel like it can relate to the celebrity culture conversation that I brought up a couple episodes ago. But it's like, how can we reframe our relationship to our talents, to our gifts, in a way where it can feel like it's truly in service of something beyond ourselves and in connection to community versus tied into this competitive culture of domination, ego-driven need to be better than anyone, which is such a wound-oriented thing. I know so many people who are incredibly talented but don't believe it because they're not able to see what impact they're having according to the metrics of success that we're currently very limited by. There's something really beautiful and really possible when we allow ourselves to really sit with ourselves as important, integral parts of the whole collective and reflect on, what are my gifts? How can I be of service? What is something that I have to offer? And then coming to see that as a duty to offer that, which is for me really beautiful because I think I'm someone who can kind of shy away from sharing. I'm clearly working on that. But to see that as we have a duty to share our gifts, it gives full permission to express and be that soulful, fully expressed version of self from a place that's also humble and true and in service of something greater. And I personally am really excited by the idea of creating more spaces and seeing more spaces where we're nurturing one another to lean into our gifts and to cultivate our gifts and to share our gifts in service of something greater, and in service of our communities and the worlds that we're trying to build. I leave you with those questions and with that prompt for yourself of, what are the gifts that I have to offer? We all have something to offer. And what do I need to clear so that I can more readily offer that to the collective as we move into this new cycle of this new calendar year? I think that reframing our gifts and our talents as something that can be of service to the collective is the thing that will keep us going when things get really hard. Because if you're taking L's left and right, and our purpose is surface level or it's ego level, that's not going to be sustainable in the long run. We have to be able to dive deeper and understand, why is it that I was given this gift? Why is it that I have this capacity to move and offer in this specific way? And tap back into that. So my prayer for you is that this next month, as we move into this next cycle of this new calendar year, that you give yourself the opportunity to remember your why, to connect to your purpose again, to refill your cup, to shed and release anything that you felt like you were just gripping onto out of fear, and to just let that shit go and create more space for you to step into the fullness of who you really are and why you really came here. I pray that this will be a moment of renewal for all of us. We have a lot of work cut out for us. And when I say work, I mean it specifically in relationship to love as work. So I wish you all of the love and all of the courage and all of the rest and all of the nourishment and all of the surrender and all of the faith and all of the trust. And we'll see what life brings us. At the end of the day, none of this is permanent. None of this is meant for us to keep. Our gifts aren't meant for us to keep. Our bodies aren't meant for us to keep forever. Our relationships, everything comes from the earth and will return to the earth. What a gift to have this moment to utilize what is loaned to us and to really give it everything that we have. The last thing I'll say is this. I was talking to my dad about moving past the energy of hesitation and really going for things, which to me is like the other more active side of surrender. Is when you feel something, allow yourself to be fully moved by that. Allow yourself to stand 10 toes down in pursuing the things that feel purposeful and true to you. Because at the end of the day, all of this is borrowed anyways. Our time is borrowed. Our time is limited. So I think for some of us, like something I've personally struggled with is sometimes feeling like crippled by wanting to make the right decision, which is ultimately that same hummingbird flying across the ceiling and being trapped type thing. Because when it comes down to it, like, what is the right or the wrong decision? To me, the right decision is something that you can stand 10 toes down in because you were so passionate about it and because it felt so true to your heart. And so I pray that for myself in this next year, that I won't use so much of my energy in those like anxiety flight patterns of just using energy trying to micromanage everything. And instead, I hope that it can be used really feeling into what's true to me, into my body, and pursuing that with all that I have. I wish that for you. I wish that for all of us, for us to live and experience rich, passionate lives. Because it's not always going to be easy. Life is life. So why not really, really, really lean in? Those are my loose leaf thoughts for the month of December 2024. Be gentle with yourself, and I'll see you next time.